Just for the record, you'll have the $32,000.
Thank you, Mr. Finance Committee Chairman.
Okay, and now this is for the Chief of Police, Tom. And I'm not sure if you didn't answer this already, but based on the proposed cuts, what kind of impact can police department heads expect for the department?
Well, for the police department, I think it's important that I point out how our budget actually works. With us, it's predicated on having 4 people on per shift. And when somebody takes a day off, calls in sick, bereavement leave, whatever, out injured, we don't fill that. We'll run with 3 people. In doing that, the budget was cut $72,000 out of overtime. So there's absolutely no money budgeted for sick time or vacation time for patrolmen, predicated on 4 people working per shift. With the recent reduction in labor, we can't do that anymore. So we're spending an exorbitant amount of money on overtime trying to fill the shifts. And I think I addressed that earlier with the permanent intermittents,
right,
trying to alleviate some of that problem. And again, it's a labor issue. Without enough personnel, I cannot fill the shifts. We need a minimum of 3 people on each shift. 1 in dispatch, and at least 2 out in the cruisers. There's certain calls that are mandated that you have to have 2 people to respond to, domestic calls and so forth. It's really a labor issue for me, and that's what it comes down to.
Thank you. Okay, and Rosemary is, since I've been calling you superintendent, I'm relaxing now. How does the cost, excuse me, Sandy, stabbed you. How does the cost per pupil for Rockport's public schools compare to other school districts?
You know, thanks for asking that question, because I hear that at meetings that we go to. People are curious about that. Yeah. I know in Rockport we are a small district, and because we are a small district, we cannot take advantage of many of the economies of scale that larger districts can. And yet in Rockport there's a commitment to the small school system because of our location and because the identity I think that people have with the Rockport public schools. So many of our citizens in Rockport have gone through the school system, and their children are going through it, or their grandparents went through it. And so there is this real commitment. Now, having said that, you think I'm going to build up to the fact that we spend a whole lot more money than other districts. In fact, that's not true. If you can go to the Department of Education website, and they keep statistics for many years, and their latest statistics show that we are just about at the state average. There are lots of communities that are a lot higher than us, and there are communities that are less than us. The ones that are a lot higher than us are a lot higher, many of them. But we are right at state average. And it's interesting the way the calculation is done as well, because you'll see an average for what the per pupil cost is. And for the latest figures from the DOE, the cost is about $8,861 per student. That's a little misleading, though, because what the state will then do is break it down into what it costs for a regular education student and what it costs for a special education student. And for a special education student, well, let me do the regular ed first. Right. The regular education student, it costs, in the last year of the figures, $7,144 per student, whereas the special needs student was $14,839.
Double.
Yeah, just about. And now this is not untypical of other right. The breakdown for the different districts, you'll see that some districts have a lower regular ed cost and a much higher special ed cost, or vice versa. Right. Again, we're about in the middle of where the state is. So, in fact, if you look at the state average for that year, the state average in the last year that they did this was higher than what we currently pay. So just so the taxpayers know, we are not way out of line. And again, I think that's pretty amazing for a small district, because in order to offer the programs that we offer to keep students in the town, it is more expensive for us than a big district where you have a large number of students that might take AP courses, for instance.
I see. Thank you. That was a good clarification. And Roxanne, you do get a question on here. When it's time to negotiate the new contracts, and I know this may be quite a while because you've recently negotiated them, Will the town/employee sharing of health insurance premium ratio of 75-25 be on the table? And the second part of that is what is going on in Ipswich regarding co-pays with insurance?
Okay. These are subjects that we look at all the time.
Right.
And I think because it's a bargaining situation, it's not easy to predict what will happen in those areas. With the 75-25 split, that's not high or low based on other communities. Some are 60-40 and some are 85-15. So 75-25 is pretty much an average, and I wouldn't expect a lot to be going on in that area. However, there are some savings that can be accomplished through other pieces of a health insurance plan, and those also have to be bargained. There is some research being done now about changing co-pays, and you bring up Ipswich because Ipswich has recently gone through a similar thing. We do have projections from our health insurance carrier that we could save on the town side about $123,000 if the co-pays were changed from a $5 for an office visit and a $25 for an emergency room visit to a $15 for an office visit and a $50 for an emergency room visit. That seems doable, and the Medical Insurance Advisory Committee has met on it, which is a representative from each union. And with that, each union would have to agree to the change. And I think in order for that to be accomplished, the members of those unions will have to evaluate how many times on an average they're visiting these services and what the savings will be in their paychecks from the decrease in the premium to see if it's worthwhile for them. It's definitely worthwhile for the town, and it's an example of how we do try to look for avenues on ways to cut expenses. We're not always wanting to go out and look for more tax money from people because we know that we have to be responsible in being stewards of the money we spend as well, and in the money we try to get as grants and other sources of revenue. But we are at the place where, even though trying to have savings and expenses, it's just not the solution at this time. We need to move ahead and maintain our operations while we're doing all of these things too.
Thank you, Roxanne.